All right, I am Ryan Aversa, and I am here with sophomore Jake Zerevitz, finance major, and I'm going to ask him a couple questions revolving around my 8A hypothesis test. So, my hypothesis test revolves around the implementation of non-lethal weapon practice in all sorts of law enforcement and jobs alike. So, Jake, referring to lethal weapons, so obviously deadly handguns and of the sort, do you think that law enforcement handles very minor situations correctly with lethal weapons?
Well, I think the use of lethal weapons isn't necessarily the issue here. I think it more lies in the training of the officers. Officers have the reserved right to use lethal weapons, in extreme emergencies. And yes, you've seen instances, especially recently, of officers misusing, that reserved right. But I think that lies more in the issue of the training.
Okay, so I'm assuming you think that a lot more training is needed regarding lethal weaponry then?
Well, not necessarily a lot more training, but I would say more of a singular training process for all police officers across the country, so it doesn't differ from department to department. I think there needs to be one regimented training process for every security or for every police officer.
Just revolving around more of like the mental things that cops go through, or more physical stature?
I think there needs to be a deeper understanding of the law, and of the rights of,
The
people,
citizens, yeah.
the rights of everybody.
Okay, all right, I agree with that. So moving towards non-lethal, do you think a non-lethal movement would have more benefits than what we see today with lethal weaponry?
No, I don't think it would.
No.
I think you'd see a lot more police officers getting killed.
Okay, that's a
Which
very valid point.
Isn't necessarily the better alternative.
Okay, so you see it as a negative, but could you see the public getting behind a non-lethal movement?
Absolutely, I could see the public getting behind that. It's not necessarily my personal opinion to move toward that, but I don't know. I think everything is moving towards a more liberal stance nowadays, which
It's very valid.
Regardless of whoever won the presidency or whoever controls the Senate, regardless, everything is moving towards a more liberal standpoint. So I think that is going to be a factor in whatever. But,
That's just what it comes down to in the
exactly.
end. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's always a valid point. So with the public getting behind something like that, can you see it spreading to other places in the world, maybe? Because communication is big, and like our globalization is the greatest it's ever been, and the global village is constantly shrinking. Do you think maybe if some people see it as valid, that it moves around the world?
I could definitely see that happening, particularly in, the European nations that we're close with.
Yeah.
Britain, especially in France, and I think I could definitely see Europe moving towards that, and maybe after that, who knows? But I think we share a lot of similarities with Europe and within that global community, as you mentioned. So I could definitely see that as a possibility.
Yeah, we have a lot of allies that do things very
especially
similar.
if we, as a people, as a general public, get behind that mindset. Then I definitely see that happening. Absolutely.
So, do you think maybe not a full out non-lethal regimen, but do you think it should be the first go-to? Like, should non-lethal always be the first target for a police officer?
Oh, absolutely. I think, that lethal weapons should only be used in extreme situations.
Yeah.
And, the average officer, in his day does not face an extreme situation. It's just a fact. But you have a lot of police officers using their weapons, regardless. So, I think it goes back to what I said earlier about the training, but
Yeah, it's all about. It's almost like the contingency viewpoint where officers need to look at the scenario and then decide. Like they need to figure out, oh, this is a scenario I've learned about, or this is a scenario I've seen, and they need to then go from there and choose how they're going to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree with that.
Yes, precisely.
So do you think officers leaning more towards the non-lethal would hurt them as a whole? Like, do you think it would hurt their career or their view from the public?
Well, I think most officers now definitely lean toward the non-lethal. I mean, most officers do not want to kill somebody. I mean, it's just most people.
That's
most
just
people
human
don't
nature.
want to kill somebody.
It's human nature.
You know, so you have to think of that. But I think in certain, you have certain areas, especially in big metropolitan areas, where police officers are used to being met with resistance and being met with hate, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
So I think there's certain areas of the country where there needs to be a concentrated effort in that regard. But there's a whole lot of determinants in my opinion, when it comes to something like that.
All these scenarios are always different. So I mean, it really just comes down to the officer himself,
right?
And then what move he makes in his head, and I mean that move is always a big one. So
exactly,
it could be deterred either way most of the time.
Absolutely.
So, say theoretically, police officers begin to use non-lethal weapons a lot, and they find some success. Do you ever see the public make a movement towards maybe like carrying non-lethal weapons? Because we see a lot of people in today's day and age, they'll get their concealed weapons permit and they'll constantly have a firearm on their side. Do you maybe see people doing the same thing but with non-lethal, like maybe a taser or something?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because I could definitely see if there's success with it, I don't see why it wouldn't catch on. But the issue that I see is it catching on in the first place, because you have this big movement nowadays of conservatives who are very, very serious about the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms.
It's been a big issue
and
recently.
I think people, if it isn't successful, would be a little angry with it, because people are saying, all right, well, you're working to take away our guns. You took away our police officers' guns. I think a lot of people would think about it in that regard, and there would be resistance.
That definitely becomes a conflict, of course.
So there's something to think about with that as well.
All right, so put yourself in a pretty shady street, like an area you're not familiar with, you don't know what's going on, and you know that police officers only have non-lethal weapons. Do you feel safe?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely
not. No, especially if I don't have a concealed weapon myself.
Yeah.
Because I personally, I don't have a concealed weapon permit. I don't have a weapon at all. I feel pretty unsafe with that.
It's definitely a tough thing to deal with.
It's not something I would feel comfortable with. So, yeah.
Say police officers find a non-lethal method that is extremely effective, like say a ballistic that basically near paralyzes the target. Would you be okay with that? Would you feel safe with that?
I wouldn't say I'd feel completely safe, but I would definitely feel safer than just a taser.
Safer than a normal.
Yeah,
normal
absolutely. I don't think. I mean, at the end of the day, I'd want the police officer,
to be able to make the move and save your life.
If something came to that, then I'd want the police officer to have.
I mean, that's
but then again, it's all circumstantial.
Valid point. Yeah.
So.
I mean, a lot of this is circumstantial.
Yeah.
But that's why it's been such a difficult issue.
Exactly.
So, do you see maybe violence becoming more prevalent if police officers only have non-lethal weapons, or maybe somehow it goes down? Like, what is your opinion on that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
So, say a non-lethal movement becomes popular. Do you see violence going ravenous, or maybe it calms down? Like, what do you think would come of that?
I would think, I'm thinking as in the shoes of criminals.
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, police officers are now pretty much unarmed.
Yeah. They're close to it.
Why would I not take my chances in doing whatever I want to do while these guys don't have guns and I have guns?
That's the big issue.
So
is these people still have lethal weapons.
Yeah, the criminals
That's
have
why
guns.
it's a very fine
they're
line.
going to get guns regardless. People sell guns to anybody.
Yeah, it's definitely a fine line that would need to be established of still having lethals with you, but always looking to use non-lethal first. But,
yes, yeah. But, I mean, then it goes back to the same thing of, you have the lethal on you anyway. The cops who don't have the right training are probably going to just try to use the lethal.
They're going to go for the
regardless.
lethal. Yeah. It's all circumstantial.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely.